Give you the heads.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, where we are all about personal empowerment, overcoming obstacles, finding our voice, standing our ground, and alternative health and healing. And today's guest is going to talk about alternative health and healing. His name is Neil Cannon. He is an author, speaker, vitality mentor, and host of the Vitality Secret podcast. His best-selling book is titled The Vitality Secret. Since 2015, Neil has been helping people become free from illness, pain, and medication by balancing their bodies across the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic pillars of vitality. Neil's main focus is reversing chronic inflammation and creating harmony in the body, and his mission is to facilitate his clients' rapid transformation from sickness to vitality. Neil, thank you so much for being here and welcome on to the show.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for welcoming me on your show.
Well, thank you for joining us in your travels, because you're actually on holiday right now, correct?
I am. Yes, I'm in the south of France. I'm not normally in this wooden cabin with tools behind me. I'm actually normally living in Baja, near Cabo, and currently in the south of France, near Provence. So doing a bit of a European, French trip.
Sounds lovely. Well, and I love that background. I actually saw that there was a little fire going too in the background. I love, how cozy.
Couldn't be more opposite to Baja, where we're sweating most of the time right now.
That's true. That's true. But
Yes.
It's beautiful down there as well. I've been to Cabo several times and absolutely love it there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you really know how to travel because you're picking all the really beautiful places south of France. And
yes,
you live near Cabo.
I do love to travel. I like to live in locations typically near the water or in mountains, but mainly near the water because I'm a kite surfer and windsurf and snowboard in the winter as well. Yeah.
Wow.
So
well, you weren't always quite this active and healthy, correct?
Correct.
Guilty. So why guilty? Why don't you share your story about how you actually healed yourself of several chronic illnesses and how you got interested in health, vitality, wellness?
Okay. So it may not surprise you that they're completely linked. Like everyone I know who works in holistic health, without exception, I'd say, everyone comes with their own story of healing themselves of something or helping a loved one. And for me, it was kind of two people. Well, one of those people was me. The other person is my dad. So I had eczema pretty badly for 30 years, since a toddler. And I was always given these symptom masking treatments, which meant it would always come back. So there were steroid creams, moisturizers, prescription moisturizers, and when it got really bad, antibiotics. Other people with eczema are often prescribed other medications as well, like immunosuppressants. So 30 years or so, this went on. And it wasn't until my father had a stroke when I had my proverbial wake-up call. And this changed everything for me because I was already in health and fitness. I'd actually written a book already which is about increasing testosterone naturally for guys. And I kept on seeing this word inflammation. And I just thought, is there a link here? And I remember my father being diagnosed with chronic inflammation a few years prior to his stroke. In fact, it was his aunt, who's a naturopathic doctor, who told him that. And I just remember precisely him telling me this. I remember where we were sitting, or standing rather, in the family home. And I started to look into it. I was thinking, hang on, if he's got inflammation, that's probably the cause of his stroke and his high blood pressure and everything. And basically that's what I found. I went on a bit of a research quest and very quickly found out it was really the underlying cause of almost every chronic illness, every common illness, and the underlying cause of his asthma, which he'd had since he was 12, which is a fully reversible condition, high blood pressure, and ultimately his life-altering stroke, which obviously changed his life and all of ours as well. That had a knock-on effect on our life. And sadly, his health isn't so great now. So his suffering actually was my wake-up call in a way. And that's when I realized that the chronic inflammation was the same underlying cause of my eczema I'd had since a toddler. So in answer to your first question, that's when I made some changes to my diet, to my lifestyle, to my habits. And I ultimately went on an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle, and very quickly everything changed. And my symptoms went away. My eczema went away. I don't like saying my eczema. The symptom known as eczema that I was experiencing went away. I can't say it's cured because that suggests it will just never come back. But I don't see eczema as something you cure. It's a symptom, and it's our bodies present symptoms depending on our genetic makeup, our genetic code. It's like a way of presenting to you a warning light to take action, to change, to get rid of the symptom, if you like. So if my body gets toxic for whatever reason, or if I'm under immense stress or something, which tends not to happen anymore, but if that were to happen, then the eczema could come back. But the point is, for the most part, it's gone because I got rid of inflammation, which is the underlying cause of it. So since 2015, that's when it happened, or that's when I kind of reversed it, 2014, 2015. I've been helping people reverse all kinds of chronic inflammatory health conditions, not just skin conditions, but conditions like arthritis and gout and type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, even Parkinson's. In one spectacular case, that wasn't even that was a side effect of helping someone reverse type 2 diabetes with a particular type of diet. Actually, the main thing we did was diet. And she just noticed that, or rather her husband noticed that her Parkinson's symptoms were easing a lot, if not disappeared when she, it was actually mostly the ketogenic diet that did that, to be honest.
So a couple of questions, or a comment, actually, really, when you were talking about your eczema and you called it my eczema, and then you changed your mind, it was more like the eczema. So it takes away that that personalization, that label. So it's not really a label that exactly, which I think is so important. And then my other question was, when you decided, you started looking into this chronic inflammation and changing your diet to a non-inflammatory type of diet, were you doing this on your own? Were you doing your own research? Did you have somebody helping you? What led you to start looking at diet? Because a lot of people might not have thought to do that.
Yeah, so I was doing it alone, and it was all my own research. I just found myself between 2011 and 2014 reading a lot of books on nutrition. I came across the Primal Blueprint and Grain Brain, Wheat Belly. A lot of them are saying the same thing, and it was all around inflammation. And the first book I kind of briefly mentioned earlier was about increasing testosterone naturally. And what I realized, having done the research for my second book, The Vitality Secret, was it's very, very closely linked, because if a guy is chronically inflamed, their testosterone levels will be compromised, because you can't have chronic inflammation and high levels of testosterone. It just doesn't go hand in hand. Or another way of saying that is chronic inflammation is a reason for hormonal imbalance, including testosterone. So if you get rid of the inflammation, that alone can help to increase testosterone. So I already had that curiosity within me for my own hormones, if you like. And I just became very interested in nutrition and reading all of these stories and all these books of people reversing all of these illnesses, predominantly with nutrition. It's not the only thing, you mentioned as well the 4 pillars earlier, but I think diet is a great thing and powering pillar or powering component of healing. And a lot of change can be made by changing one's diet. And that's what I found. So in answer to your question, mainly my own personal research for my own needs, as it were.
I absolutely love that, because you were actually taking personal responsibility, and with that came personal empowerment, because it put you back in charge, and you weren't at the mercy of other people giving you the medications or the creams, the moisturizers, the antibiotics, that type of thing. And I mean, to me, that is really powerful. And especially when you do your own research, it's such an enlightening experience because you get so much more out of it. And then you can weigh what you're learning and decide what really does work for you and what does not.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I think I would go as far as to say is having personal ownership over one's health. I call it radical responsibility, is the secret sauce. I really think it's the secret sauce to healing because, you know, from the moment we're born almost, or certainly from very young babies or young children, we've almost been, I don't like to use the word, I'm going to say conditioned, almost conditioned to kind of give our power away around our health. And there's no one who knows our health the best really than ourselves. Or no one knows our health like we do. So we need to understand our bodies better than any doctor can, really. And I think the personal empowerment and the personal responsibility inspires research, like you mentioned. You know, as well as books, I was watching documentaries, and I watched so many documentaries. I was like, everyone needs to see this, everyone needs to see this, everyone needs to see this. Everything changed. I was like, this is so simple.
It's so funny when you start that journey of doing your own research and you're learning this incredible information that makes so much sense and seems like it should be so simple, it should be common knowledge. It just makes you want to learn more. And that just, keeps on going in this incredible cycle and spiral of learning and trying new things. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling how wonderful it is.
It really is. So many doors have opened up to me since I've gone down this path. Doors that I never imagined would have opened up. I would never have understood the world of energy and how you can heal the body through thought alone, and the power of our emotions, the power of our thoughts and frequency and the body electric. And you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, but I just spent a week with Dr. Joe Dispenza at his advanced retreat in Cancun in June, and everyone's changing their bodies and their lives through energy and meditation. I don't know if I'd ever have gotten onto that path had I not had my own challenges, my own health challenges. It actually reminds me of something a friend once said to me. I run this Wim Hof breathing group, have done for almost 2 years now. And at the end of one of our sessions, he actually shared that vanity is the gateway to consciousness. And I went, that's interesting. I kind of agreed. And then I thought, I'm going to make a slight amendment. I think sickness is the gateway to consciousness. Because if we get sick and we go down the personal empowerment route, if you like, and we start doing our own research, that's when doors open up that we never knew existed prior to getting sick. You know, on my podcast, I've interviewed a lot of people who have reversed incurable illnesses according to Western medicine. And most, if not all of them, are grateful for having had the illness because it's given them enlightenment to a degree. So, yeah.
That's basically what happened to me. I don't know if you know my story, but, and I told you before we were recording, I have 2 medical degrees. I was a respiratory therapist for 17 years working in the hospitals, critical care, all that type of thing before I went to graduate school and got my master's in physical therapy. But during that time I was an RT, I ended up with a horrible chronic pain syndrome. And I was in my mid-30s. And for 2.5 years, of course, I was Western medically trained. So I did everything I was told. I took all the medication. I went to all my doctor's appointments. I did all the stupid stretches and exercises that I was told to do, even though not only were they not helping, I just kept getting worse. And I lived that life for 2.5 years until finally I hit rock bottom. And it was like, this is not working. I have to take matters into my own hands. So I actually fired my entire medical team and started researching my own path to health and healing. And I did it through movement and movement awareness. I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured if these exercises weren't working, let me find movements that were. And so basically it took about 9 months. The only thing I did add was acupuncture, and I made a complete and total recovery.
Amazing.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And it was incredibly empowering. And then after I became a physical therapist, I hated the work. I hated it. So I ended up just opening my own office, my own clinic, and using those same techniques to teach to my clients so they could heal themselves through movement. But when in regards to the dietary component, even though I had my bachelor's in RT, my master's in PT, there was absolutely no emphasis on nutrition. It's like, okay, eat healthy, eat a balanced diet. And here's the, in America, the FDA, what is it? The food pyramid, and follow that. And as we all know, that food pyramid really is not very effective. So it was amazing how
flip it on its head and it gets effective.
Yes, exactly. And I'm probably much older than you, but as I was growing up, that's when processed foods became a really big deal. And
sure.
everybody was buying and serving and cooking with processed foods. And I think that's where a lot of our downfall, especially as in a modern society, especially in America, it started.
Yes, there's a huge problem with the processed food introductions, and also when fat was demonized and the whole low fat craze in the early 80s, that contributed to the obesity epidemic in a big way, as well as all the processed food and artificial flavorings and genetically modified organisms that where nature has been messed with. I think it's a very dangerous game.
And I think sugar, is one of them too. That's huge, because with the processed foods along came, incredible amounts of sugar in all of these foods that we didn't even know. It wasn't until, I was going through some of my transformations that I really started reading labels at the grocery store, and I was horrified to see how much sugar was in things that I never knew before.
Yeah. It's hidden. It's everywhere. When I started looking at yogurts, yogurts often look healthy, and they'll say low fat and then have 20 grams of sugar in them or something like that. And all the soft drinks that they'll say diet, and then you'll see all the chemicals added, and it's a bit of a minefield. But when one goes back to basics, we often hear eat as your grandmother did or great grandmother did. Before the introduction of all of this stuff, we were meant to be having fat. Fat is actually really healthy. The good types of fat, of course. I'm not talking trans fats and fried food, that kind of stuff. But it's back to basics, back to the nature codes. I always talk about the nature codes, and in my latest book, I've talked about it quite a lot. The closer we stick to the nature codes, the healthier we can be. I honestly believe that. Sadly, we've kind of been taken away from them, and Mother Nature, I believe, has all the answers. It's when man kind of interrupts with food processing or how food is grown, and wheat is hybridized. It's gone through mutagenesis and then Roundup Ready. There's no wonder that's inflammatory for so many people, particularly in America. And corn and soy, it's all been altered. And there's many studies now that have been done on these foods. Whilst they go through the ridiculous FDA 3-month approval, you start to study what happens a year, 2 year, 3 year later, and you start to see the knock-on effects of what happens when we play God and alter alter food. It's not.
So let me go down me go down a rabbit hole right now of conspiracy theory, okay? Because it's almost like that this has been done by design. I mean, of course, the convenience of having some of these processed foods and stuff, but when you look into it and this incredible cycle of declining health, like you said, obesity, diabetes, I have never in, my life seen so many people with autoimmune disorders. And so what do they do with all of these conditions? They give them more medications to manage the condition without going to what you always say and you've said this several times in, your bio. I stalked you online, so I'm familiar with your website and all of your bios and stuff, is getting to the root cause of chronic conditions and chronic pain, illness.
Yeah.
And it's so simple.
I don't think the body was designed to be complicated. I think
Mm,
man has made it complicated. One thing I love to do, in fact, something I'm told I'm good at, is making complex theories simple.
mhm,
And I honestly don't think the body was made to be complicated. If we
mhm,
get a symptom, it's like a warning light in your car dashboard
mhm,
saying, "Pay attention, your oil needs changing."
mhm,
So we've got two options. We can either go to an electrician and have the light rewired so it stops flashing, or we
mhm,
go to a mechanic and get to the root cause of the problem.
mhm,
So I'm using the car analogy in a silly way here, but like if we can go to the mechanic, or we become our own mechanic and we go right into the root cause, we can address it and allow the body to heal itself, because the body is
mhm,
constantly healing. It's a self-healing machine.
mhm,
And more often than not, it's very simple. It's toxins and it's trauma.
mhm,
And and in addition to a deficiency in cell fuels.
mhm,
So I was going to ask you about your chronic pain, because
mhm,
chronic pain, I immediately think of trauma.
mhm,
When I've helped people with chronic pain, there tends to be an underlying trauma, or a number of traumas, and
mhm,
we all go and experience trauma going through our lives.
mhm.
Did you do much of that when you had your healing experience? Was that part of the movement? Because I know movement is part of, you can actually do trauma release with a movement.
I did not experience that with the chronic pain syndrome. But years later, right before I started my martial arts training, which, there's a reason why I started, I had a significant trauma. And
Mm,
that's kind of what took me down that path eventually. And that was a lot of trauma release, but it wasn't through like therapy. I tried therapy and I couldn't stand it. I mean, it was just like I felt like it was a waste of my time and was kind of
mm.
having a negative impact on my mental health rather than a positive
It
one.
does.
And
Yeah.
it was traumatizing me even more. And that's when my sensei finally, who was my acupuncturist at the time, finally convinced me to start trying a couple of martial arts classes, thinking that that might help me heal. Well, he was convinced it would help me heal. I was the one that said, no, that's impossible. I don't understand how hanging out in a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men who are trying to beat me up is going to make me feel any better. But man, it was so powerful. And I'm not saying that it
Wow.
happened right away. It was definitely a slow process, and it wasn't always an easy one, but it was so empowering. And at the same time, I was studying a movement modality, a specific form of movement modality called Feldenkrais, who Moshe Feldenkrais was also a martial artist. So those two specific movement modalities or movement arts came together in a way that just was phenomenal. It was just absolutely phenomenal.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank
You just said something that very much resonated. And you said the therapy made it worse.
you.
Are you familiar with the term nerve cells that fire together wire together?
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah.
Term in neuroscience. So
Yes.
the more that we talk about an event, the more energy we give to it, the more
Hmm.
synapses and nerve cells fire and wire,
Hmm.
and we end up giving the very thing we want to stop thinking about, or we want to
Hmm.
forget, more energy. And
Hmm.
where focus goes, energy goes, and where attention flows, energy goes, and then it
Hmm.
expands.
Hmm.
And we end up making things worse when we give something energy, because the energy starts to expand around the very thing we
Hmm.
want to not experience anymore. So that's why I like somatic release of trauma. So we don't have to do any kind of
Hmm.
talking. You
Hmm.
know, I use a process called the emotion code by Dr. Bradley Nelson.
Hmm.
There's many ways of doing it. Somatic therapy.
Hmm.
And we use kinesiology to find out the names of emotions, where they're stored, when they were stored,
Hmm.
were they in this lifetime, or inherited emotion, because we inherit emotions and
Hmm.
trauma from our
Hmm.
ancestors. And you can find it all out through applied kinesiology, and you can
Hmm.
release it in seconds, because
Hmm.
emotions are electromagnetic,
Hmm.
just like we are. We are
Hmm.
electromagnetic beings, we're electrical beings, we're
Hmm.
energetic beings, we're energy beings. And it can be really quick.
Hmm.
I've had clients get rid of pain in one session with the emotion code.
Oh, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
okay, so here was my conflict too, especially with the chronic pain syndrome, because all of the things that we're talking about now with the, the energy and, that type of thing, I kind of would poo-poo because I was trained in the Western medical mindset of, you got a problem, you do this therapy or these exercises or take this medication. So it was a huge leap for me to even go to an acupuncturist for the first time. I was like, I wanted to go wearing a disguise so nobody would see me just in case, because I was like, I can't believe I'm
Wow.
trying this voodoo acupuncture. But it was something
Wow.
that I know completely changed my life and my focus once I started realizing that I had the power to heal myself. And you said it beautifully. The body has an incredible power to heal itself. That's what our bodies are made to do and meant to do. The cells are turning over and, creating new cells. It's
Mm,
constant. So it's not like we're this machine. We're dynamic beings. And when we
totally.
can support that environment, that's when we have health and vitality.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. When I think about the body and its ability to heal itself, think of
Mhm,
when we injure, I don't know, you fall over and you get a cut on your arm. You can
mhm,
virtually watch it heal.
mhm,
It heals, obviously, depending on the size of it. We
mhm,
know how fast the skin heals. Skin is
mhm,
one organ in the body, happens to be
mhm,
the biggest organ on the body.
mhm,
And it's just one indication of how fast the body regenerates, how quickly the cells regenerate, and we get new
mhm,
cells, as you mentioned. If
mhm,
we can apply that same methodology or the same realization or awareness to other
mhm,
organs in the body, we start to understand that the body is designed to heal itself and is
mhm,
constantly regenerating.
mhm,
So one of one of my favorite teachers is Dr. Joe Tennant, and he
mhm,
talks about the body electric. Well, he
mhm,
teaches the body electric. And I watched one of his presentations, which summarized 7 years of, by that point, the how the body gets sick. And he
mhm,
talks about how all illness is a result of the body losing the ability to create new cells that work,
mhm,
or rather, a characteristic of all illness is the body's inability to create new cells that work.
mhm,
Another characteristic is a characteristic of all illness is low voltage to an organ,
mhm,
not enough power getting to an organ. So I always use the an example of a light flickering in the house.
mhm.
You know, if the light starts flickering, what do we do? I used to be an electrician, so the
Ah,
moment I heard him talk about the body electric, I was like, oh,
mm,
bang, 7 years,
uh-huh.
that's explained everything in 45 minutes.
I
So
love it.
the the light starts flickering. Why does it start flickering? Well, there's a reason somewhere.
Mhm,
There's not enough power going to the light. Why is there not
mhm,
enough power going to the light? As an electrician, you go and reverse
mhm,
engineer why that's happening. Same
mhm,
thing with the body. You can actually do that.
mhm,
And you know, a lot of illness is rooted in, poor gut
mhm,
health and leaky gut in the
mhm,
case of autoimmune conditions.
mhm,
So what's caused leaky gut? We can
mhm,
blame food. Well, we can attribute food to a lot of the
mhm,
challenges with leaky gut. But why with some people were they fine until a certain point, and then suddenly they can't eat the same things they've been consuming their
mhm,
whole lives.
mhm,
And where we can make a lot of changes with nutrition, absolutely. And there's so many
mhm,
people who have reversed autoimmune conditions predominantly with nutrition
mhm,
and with gut health. Some
mhm,
amazing teachers out there who have helped people get rid of all kinds of autoimmune conditions.
mhm,
And gut health is a huge focus. I like to go even a step further and say, why has the gut become weakened in the first place?
mhm,
And that's where the body electric comes in,
mhm,
because I would say as well, a big contributing factor to a weak gut where it becomes weaker is stress. A lot of illness is down to stress. In fact, 90% of illness is attributed to chronic stress.
mhm,
And what's happening with stress? We're draining all the energy from the gut. We're
mhm,
literally draining power from the gut. We All these stress hormones start pumping. The energy
mhm,
drains from the gut, goes into our extremities so we can escape a saber-toothed tiger. It's a brilliant way to get out of
mhm,
trouble, fight or flight response, survival
mhm,
response. The only thing is when that happens again and again and again, oh, and what's not necessarily necessary during that time is your own innate immune system. It's not
mhm,
required when you need to escape that tiger. The body's really intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
But when we have that sustained response for quite some time, the gut gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And a lot of people will immediately attribute stress to their illness. As soon as you kind of talk about it, they'll say, oh yeah, I've got a really stressful job, or I've got a relationship, or that's stressful, or this X is causing me stress. So I think most people can relate to that. And if we kind of have a basic understanding of the body electric, it's energy draining from the gut, which is the kind of the engine for the body. And there's other reasons why it happens, like infected root canals and cavities and mercury and all other toxins in the body causing a drop in voltage to any organ.
So I love the way that you're, you know, explaining this, because it makes so much sense. And when you're talking about stress, of course, I think globally, we have been under so much stress, you know, with the pandemic, that really did a number on a lot of our immune systems. And it was really important, you know, to try and pay attention, especially now, you know, to build ourselves back up again, to meditate, to eat right, to pay attention to how we're feeling. All of those things come together, which again, that goes into your pillars. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But I love the way that you explain how, you know, you used energy and talked about neuroscience at the same time. Because when I would hear people talking, you know, about energy before, it's like, okay, they're talking this voodoo thing, but it actually does impact. It's based in neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And then the fact that you pulled the electrician in there too. So you've got this beautiful triad of, you know, understanding the electrical system, the energetic system, you know, the neuroplasticity or the neuroscience system, and that it all feeds together. So you can't just dissect one and put that in a bucket and the other one in another bucket. It just, the way you described it, it really flows together very beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it when different teachings all say the same thing, just from a different angle. You just go, that makes sense. That's how my journey's been the whole time. It's like, bang, that makes sense. Oh, toxins, where am I toxic? You know, that's the first question I always ask any of my clients. Where's the toxin? Where are the toxins coming from? If there's toxins, we're going to get a drop in voltage. We're going to get depleted cell fuel because the body's toxins build up and they can't discharge all the toxins, and that's one reason why the drop in voltage. And anyway, there's lots of ways you can kind of reverse engineer all this. Can we pause for 1 second? I'm just gonna
absolutely. So
we unless you want to edit.
Actually, I'll just cut it out. Oh, wait, let's just pause and see if. So what I'd really like to talk about now, this was a perfect segue, is to get into your book, the Vitality, hang on a second, the Vitality Secret?
The current one is the Vitality Secret, this one.
That
I
one.
just happen to have a copy with me in the south of France. So that's the current one. That's the 2016 version. And the one that I'm currently doing my final edits on right now is called the Vitality Code. And the subtitle I've yet to decide on, but I will be covering the 4 pillars of vitality: physical, mental, emotional, and energetic. I believe we need to cover every one of those to create healing in the bodies.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you know, I love the fact that you are traveling in the south of France with your books. And and going through the final editing process. Wow, huh? That's a trip.
It's a thing. It's a journey.
It is a journey.
Yeah. I'm often saying no more. But it's almost addictive once you start. But the editing process is almost harder than, well, it is harder than the actual writing, because when you write, you can flow. Yeah. And then when you're editing, you're rereading all of what you've written and going, why have I said that? That needs to be rewritten. And then you got the edits anyway. I won't.
Well, typically that was coming from my editor. It's like, well, what did you mean when you were saying this? And I'm like, I don't know. Do I have to go into that?
Figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say would be the number one secret to vitality?
Ooh. This has changed, interestingly. So when I wrote the Vitality Secret, the number one secret was eliminate inflammation and allow your body to heal itself. Get to the cause of the inflammation, and then your body can heal itself. So in fact, it's not really changed. Maybe it's just expanded, because I'd still say get to the cause of your illness, detoxify, replenish your cells, think about cell fuels, think about where the toxins are coming from, take the toxins out, put the fuel back in. That's kind of what I do. And now I would say the ultimate secret is your state of mind. And it's I would never have said this 7 years ago. And I'd say meditation is one of singularly the most powerful tool that we have to heal ourselves. And I mentioned earlier spending a week at Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced retreat in Cancun. There were people didn't change their diet, didn't change their toxins, didn't change anything, didn't start moving more, were sedentary the whole time, purely through meditation, reversing illnesses.
Wow.
And people have attended his retreats. It's not him doing it, it's people doing it themselves. And by the way, one of his my favorite books of his is Becoming Supernatural. And what we can do with energy, with our minds and our emotions, is just staggering. And this was all in teachings going back thousands and thousands of years. It's just been removed from our awareness. And I have witnessed people reverse illnesses in the space of a few days through energy. And there are so many stories on the website, so many case stories and testimonials of people reversing almost anything you can think of. There are stories of people with multiple brain tumors disappearing in a week, handicapped people walking again, deaf people hearing again, blind people seeing again. I'm about to interview someone on my podcast who reversed blindness in my kind of hometown, and I say kind of my hometown in England called Brighton. He did an event there. It's my second hometown. It's my university town. And she was almost blind, further to a stroke, and further to the meditations and spending a lot of time in nothingness and becoming resistant free and allowing another force to come through. We don't need to give it a name. Let's just say energy. She healed herself completely. They did iris scans before the event and after the event. The doctor's going, this makes absolutely no sense. And what I'm loving seeing is doctors attending his events, because he's like,
nice.
He has scientists, he's working with scientists, and they're like, can you explain how this new information is in the blood? Can you tell us how the genes are upregulating? Can you tell us how the genes for disease are downregulating? And it's happening through meditation.
Wow.
And he was talking, after 5 to 7 days, he looked at the whole audience with 1,500 people. He's like, you have all had a biological upgrade just by being here. But by spending all this time in this meditative state, and we were literally healing each other with our hands, because we can all have energy come out of our hands. I don't know if you've ever done the energy ball exercise to feel your own energy.
Absolutely. Tai Chi.
Yeah, and I've been doing that myself with not professionally, but with clients and girlfriends and that kind of thing. It is remarkable. So that's a long way of saying the ultimate secret. I don't know if I can call it a secret, but it's the power of the mind. It's our perception of our world and how we, using the mind to heal yourself.
Well, it's not a secret anymore because you just, said it out loud
That's
to
true.
all of us and we're listening. So
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that secret.
Recently. You're welcome. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now tell us about your podcast. Oh, so you did just tell us a little bit about that one woman that you interviewed, but tell us about your podcast, how long you've had it, how people can find it. Just what made you start a podcast? I'm always interested in that.
I was at Burning Man in 2015, and I was introduced to a woman who had reversed her multiple sclerosis naturally. Or she would maybe 95% through healing. And like you, she'd tried all these Western medicine approaches, and she was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So she decided to take radical responsibility for her health, and she changed a lot of things about her life. And she was telling me this on the playa in the middle of a desert with music going on behind us. And I was blown away. I was just thinking, I need to share stories like this with the world. And her name is Kerry Van Arnsdale. And yeah, she was my first ever episode. It's been going on for quite a while, on and off, since around that time, around 2015, 2016.
Wow.
I did rebrand it. I'm afraid I don't have as many episodes as I'd like to at all, by any means. They've been a little bit sporadic, but it's something I'm definitely going to be picking up more of now, because I actually love doing podcast interviews. And these stories, when I share them and when I hear from listeners how impactful it's been, I just think it's a wonderful thing to do. Because I think if we hear stories of whatever illness it is, if someone has the same thing and they hear it and they can say, if that person's done it, then I can do it. We don't have to say, oh, it's not science because it's not gone through double-blind, upside-down, reverse clinical trials. If that person's done it, then I can do it. That's the way I look at it. And that's the way a lot of people do it. If they've reversed multiple sclerosis that way, that body is the same as mine. I mean, it's not that different biologically. So I want to do what they've done. And a lot of people do that. You know, the Truth About Cancer series, there'll be many people saying it's not science. Well, look into all of these stories of people radically reversing cancers, radical remission. Dr. Kelly Turner interviewing hundreds of people who radically reverse advanced stages of cancer. There's some who will claim it's not science. And I said, well, look at what they did. Look at what's shown here. It's amazing. The body's designed to heal itself. And we can model what other people do. So anyway, that's the reason why I launched the podcast.
But don't you think that is changing now, when people saying, well, it's not science? Basically, there is a scientific basis that we're seeing now that we can say, because the science of neuroscience has come so far. And I think that just the fact that you said, with this Dr. Benzer, I can't remember his name, when he was doing these presentations, he has medical doctors now attending. So do you think that maybe there's more of a level of consciousness and awareness that's coming to this type of healing, that it really, okay, so it's not science-based with a double-blind test, blah, 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 but you cannot argue the results.
Exactly.
They speak for
and
themselves.
Yes, there is definitely an awareness coming through. And Joe Dispenza is his name. When he was asking the scientists, where is this information coming from? They say, we don't know, but it's there. It's there. It's in the blood. You've got anti-cancer metabolites in the blood. They weren't there before the meditation. What are they doing there now? It's coming from the field. But science can't approach the field. They can't approach the quantum field. It's a little uncomfortable for a lot of people. But what we can do is say, look, the data doesn't lie. The results don't lie. And there are outside of Joe Dispenza, there's thousands of studies on meditation. You can just Google it and see how meditation reduces inflammation. They don't know how it happens, but it happens. And the more that we immerse, the way I see it, the more that we immerse ourselves into this space of nothingness, this kind of being free of thought, devoid of thought, if you like. It's not completely free of thought, but it's becoming resistant, free. Resistance free. We notice a thought come in and we kind of let it go again. And the more that we practice it, it actually becomes really enjoyable. I actually love doing meditations now. It used to be a chore for me to do it for 10 minutes. Now I'll happily do a 1 hour meditation in the morning and be guided into nothingness because the feeling is so good. And I've started to have third eye experiences, and this pressure of the third eye kind of awakening. I've had visuals. I've had DMT experiences in a meditation. That was actually at Joe Dispenza's event. We did 4 hours of pineal gland activation using breath and energy, bringing it up the spine, basically Kundalini energy, but he wouldn't call it Kundalini. He wouldn't call it that. But it's bringing energy up the spine from the root up into the pineal gland, doing it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. And I was having visuals from meditation. I mean, it's just cool. It's fun, and sorry,
no, don't say that. I just want to reiterate for the audience, how quickly these changes happen.
Mm.
The physiological changes when you are doing even a short meditation.
Yes, it's profound.
Mm-hmm.
It is profound. And I talk about a supercharged meditation called heart and brain coherence. Are you familiar?
No, I
Okay,
have to I have to confess I don't meditate. I meditate through movement, and I've
that's a
tried
form of
before, like
meditation.
yeah, exactly, and it works for me. And I recently started knitting again. I had given it up about 12 years ago for various reasons, and I finally said, I really think I need to start knitting again. I picked up the needles, got some yarn, and it was just like that. To me, I could sit for hours, and I mean, it's just so calming and so relaxing.
And that is a form of meditation
Yeah.
completely. We don't, I'm really glad you brought that up because we don't have to sit in silence to meditate.
Mhm,
We can go
mhm,
for walks in nature, we can swim, we can do anything
mhm,
where we are disconnected from our our normal brain, if you like,
mhm,
disconnected from the logical brain. We can get into that flow state. You can go running, go walking, get in. I particularly like nature because there is
mhm,
something magical, something that je ne sais quoi in
mhm,
nature when you're connected to trees and nature.
mhm,
We are literally connected. And that's, we can probably all identify with having insights and ideas when we're in
mhm,
nature or in
mhm,
the shower. And,
mhm,
when you're just kind of enjoying that water falling onto your head
mhm,
and you're not really thinking of anything and you just have this light bulb moment.
mhm,
That's a
mhm,
form of meditation and we're shifting our frequency,
mhm,
getting a bit kind of quantum now, but we're raising our frequency to a level where we're receiving the same frequency of information.
mm,
So it's I love it. I can solve problems through meditation.
mhm,
And again, that doesn't have to be sitting by myself in
mhm,
silence. It can be or music. It can be in
mhm,
nature.
mhm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
So
Well,
you do meditate.
I have to go back to what you were talking about with the podcast and why you started it. In the first
Mm.
place, was you're actually through other people's stories, giving people all around the world the gift of hope, the gift of hope and healing. And that is something that is just, it's priceless.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my intention. I've seen a lot of people suffering
Mm-hmm.
and for whatever reason, my own suffering, my dad's suffering, my mom's suffering, and
Mm-hmm.
people near to me suffering. We don't have to be this way. The
Right.
human body is so much better. I've always had this intuition that we're so much more powerful than we've ever been allowed to believe. And
Mm-hmm.
it's actually like an intuition I've had since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think I had Jesus like powers when I was a kid. And I was like, hang on, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And it's just that having that kind of curiosity. I'm starting to realize that we can all do very similar things, like heal with people with our hands. We can all do it. We can all
Mm-hmm.
heal ourselves with energy. We have access to these quantum tools and they're free,
Uh-huh.
which is amazing.
I love
So
it.
yeah, thank you. I do like to instill people with hope
That's
because
awesome.
there is so much more available to us than what meets the eye
Mhm.
with one particular form of learning, which is Western medicine. It's just one method of learning.
Yes, and that brings me to one thing I did want to bring up. It's a quote that I saw on your bio, is that you said your body's ability to heal without drugs is greater than anyone in Western medicine has ever allowed you to believe. And to me, that was very profound and just really resonated with me.
I'm glad it did. Yeah, it's yes, it's. I adapted another one. I must confess, I adapted another quote,
Oh,
which has still not been claimed, but I made it more specific to come up with that one. Um, the yes, the current one is your body's ability to heal is greater
mhm,
than you have ever been allowed to believe. I've taken the
mhm,
Western medicine bit out.
mhm,
Um, but it is specific when the Western medicine part is in there. And what I think it's useful to know how they're trained. I've written about the history of their training of Western medicine, by the way, in my book.
mhm,
I think it's very useful to know the history and when it's very useful to see a Western medicine doctor and when it's not so useful. I think that they're amazing. You know, medicine or drugs and surgery are phenomenal in emergencies. We can't ever deny that. My parents are alive thanks to drugs and surgery, and some of my friends, very very close friends of mine, are alive thanks to them. And I'd also say that's all in the emergency kind of situation. So if we switch over to chronic illness and dis-ease, that's where I would say the training is limited. And the predominant treatment is drugs and surgery when they don't ever address the cause. And I think most people can actually identify with that. And you know, we know that, you know, if you've got asthma, for example, you take a steroid inhaler, it opens up the bronchial tubes, which were inflamed. Why are they inflamed? That's the question I want to know. There's always a reason. And it often goes back, more often than not, goes back to trauma at some point in our lives. And in fact, my father said he knows when I asked him if he knew when his asthma started, because he always said it started when he was 12. I said, what happened at 12? And he said, I had this really traumatic event. I was like, oh, interesting. And he told me about it. And he said, ever since then, I've had asthma. But he was never taught or told or shown how to get to the trauma and release it. And you don't have to go and do talk therapy. We can do it somatically. We can release the energy.
I actually was on inhalers. I was diagnosed with asthma. And I guess I was in my late 40s. And I kept saying, I don't have asthma. And they're like, oh, yes, you do. And if you don't take these inhalers, if you don't take care of this, that you're going to damage the interstitium. And I know what the interstitium is of my lungs, and I certainly didn't want it damaged. But I kept saying, look at my PFTs, my pulmonary function tests, because all of my volumes were at least 100% and sometimes even better. But I did have a lot of tightness in my chest, and it was hard for me sometimes to breathe because I was holding my breath. And that was related to the trauma. You know, it was just kind of like when I realized that I could relax. And, you know, even the muscles, the intercostal muscles were so tight that I was able to expand them with deep breathing and relaxation and my form of meditation, lying down. It reversed everything. And they kept upping my dosage of steroidal inhalants. And I thought, this is not right. And that's when I figured it out on my own. And you have to be your own private detective. You have to have that innate curiosity.
Yes, absolutely. Curiosity. I think you just hit the nail on the head. And yeah, the detectives, it's so interesting. If we can just tune into our own innate intelligence and just say, hang on, the body doesn't get sick because of a pharmaceutical drug deficiency. It doesn't get sick because of a steroid deficiency. It doesn't get sick because of an aspirin deficiency. Something has fallen out of balance. So we just go sit with that for a moment and go, why have I got sick? What's in my life has caused me to get sick? You know, talking about science, one of my favorite sciences is the science of epigenetics. And that determines that it is the environment in the body that signals the health of our genes, or signals our genes, which then signals the health of our cells. So environment is epi. So epi is above the genes. Epi means above. Genes is below. Genes is the hardware. Epigenetics is the software. The software runs the hardware. So when we create an environment conducive to healing in the body can heal itself. We know the power of the placebo effect. You know, you mentioned the #1 vitality secret earlier. You asked it. We can heal the body through thought alone. The placebo effect has proven this. In around a third of cases of placebo trials, we know that results are from, when they're compared with drugs or a drug or a treatment, we know the placebo effect is responsible for around a third, maybe 50% of results sometimes. We know it's proven. So we take that inert substance, you take the pill, you're telling yourself that's getting rid of my symptom or that illness or whatever it is. You take it morning and night for however long. You're, through the sheer power of belief, you are commanding your own concoction of chemicals to heal yourself. You're saying, create the perfect concoction of chemicals, thought, emotion, cascade of chemicals and hormones, our perfect concoction of chemicals to heal the body. And by some kind of magic, the body heals itself. That's how powerful the mind is. So we can apply that consciously without taking the pill. And that's how powerful the body can be.
I was just going to say, and that is power.
And that is power. Yeah.
Well, Neil, where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you?
They can find me at vitalitysecret.com. That's secret without an S, singular, vitalitysecret.com. And my the current book is The Vitality Secret. And my next book is going to be called The Vitality Code, most likely. And to be confirmed, but that's most likely going to be the title. But that will also be found there. If you go to vitalitysecret.com/book, you can download the copy of, or an e-copy of The Vitality Secret. And there's also a link for the podcast on the website as well.
Okay. And social media, where can they find you on social media? Of course, all these links are going to be in the show notes, but I like for the guests to be able to share that.
Yes. On Instagram, I'm Neil Cannon Vitality. On Facebook, I'm Neil Cannon. I'm actually Neil Cannon 1980. I've also got a Vitality Secret page, but because of Facebook algorithms, I use my own personal profile. It's more effective. LinkedIn, Neil Cannon 8, Neil Cannon. Yeah, just Neil Cannon. YouTube, Neil Cannon 80. It's a few. Okay. Yeah. If you'd like to download my book and be updated with the next one that's coming along, which is really going into greater depth with the 4 pillars of vitality, just go to vitalitysecret.com/book and you can get it there. Okay, excellent.
Neil, this has been so amazing having you on the show. I have loved this conversation. I have learned a lot, and I just am so grateful for the work that you're doing, sharing the secret with the world, and make sure that it isn't a secret anymore, that everybody knows about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. It's been an honor to be in your show. Hope it's really valuable for your listeners.
I think it is. It's great information, and I think we need to shout it from the rooftops. Everybody needs to know this.
I agree. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
And everybody, thank you for listening. I always appreciate you tuning in, and do check out Neil's website, go to his social media, contact him, get his book, and just remember that you've got that power within yourself. Your body has an incredible ability to heal itself. All you have to do is have the right mindset and the right tools to give it the environment to heal, and we can all be healthy and vitality and vibrant energy all the days of our lives. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.